Larry Rubin and I go back a long way. You all probably noticed. When I first went to Holly Springs, now I think Larry was already there. He said he wasn't there. He said he came after I got there. But I went to Holly Springs in 1962. Larry came up there to represent one of the unions and to become one of the organizers. And Larry and the sheriff became on a first-name basis right away. Because every time they saw Larry, they put him in jail. And I used to tell Larry from George, I would not ride in the car with him on Friday, because if you rode in the car with him on Friday, you spend the weekend in jail. So I wouldn't ride with Larry on Fridays. And so that's how he got on the first name basis with the sheriff. He just locked him up every time he saw him. And, but Larry was one of the people who really had the courage to organize in Mississippi when most black people were scared to organize in Mississippi. And he should have been scared, but he probably wasn't smart enough to be scared at the time. He was just a courageous person who believed in freedom. And we're glad to have friends like that. The first time I ran for office here in the District of Columbia, he managed my campaign, and he was my first executive director for my office when I served on the city council. So my good friend for life, Larry Rubin.
Of course, what Frank doesn't say is the reason I was arrested was for associating with Frank Smith. The sheriff's name was John Ash. Everybody called him Flick Ash. He's still alive, still going strong. I wanted to add something to the statement that Frank gave out, talking about the SNCC people that came to Washington to help build the Home Rule movement. And we came to Washington because after SNCC was falling apart, we figured, well, what do? We do voter registration. And who needs it most but Washington, D.C., before Home Rule? Fast forward to 2003, when we had a reunion in Holly Springs, Mississippi, where Frank and I both worked. And Frank brought a statement to this reunion, to the celebration of civil rights from the city of Washington, D.C., in which the city of Washington, D.C. congratulated Holly Springs for all the progress it had made in getting people to vote, and saying, we hope someday to catch up with you. I had the privilege of working for Frank as his first executive assistant at a time when Marion and Ivanhoe had created in this city an atmosphere, an excitement of optimism, of hope, of sure progress. It's going to happen. It was an amazing time, an exciting time. I've been asked to speak just to one aspect of that, which has to do with Marion's encouragement and relationship to organized labor, which was closest to my heart because I've worked for, as Frank said, I've worked for the union movement most of my life. In D.C., in many cases, it's true today too, there's been a chasm between the black community and organized labor for a variety of reasons. But Marion understood that unions are just working people organized to fight for their own interests. And he understood that that energy could be very important in transforming DC from a colony into a self-governing city. From the beginning, he welcomed organized labor as his partner in building this city and transforming it. In fact, in many cases, the DC locals of various unions were the abandoned stepchild of their national unions for a variety of reasons. But Marion in DC gave them a voice, empowered them, and that incidentally had a lot of impact later on the national unions. One of the first things he did to illustrate his closeness to organized labor, there was this fella that had a massive strike. He led a massive strike against Marion, a strike of correctional officers. And one of the first things Marion did was to take this young man and make him one of his closest advisors, Bernard Demchuk. I like to think of it that he asked you to advise him on how to best serve the needs of organized labor, and thus best serve the needs of the Washington community. That too. In recent years, I was working for the Carpenters Union with Tom Blanton, back there, and Marion was the go-to council member for groups, especially fighting for low-wage workers and trying to win justice for workers who are being taken advantage of, sometimes not even being paid by their bosses. He was the only council member to show up at hearings called by various committees overseeing workers' rights bill. He was the only one to show up. When he was chair of such a committee, working people knew that they were going to get a fair shake. Tom and I once were at a demonstration in the Wilson Building with a group of low-wage workers, most of whom couldn't even speak English. And they were fighting for a bill against what we call wage theft. And they were given a cold shoulder by just about every council member there, except for Marion, who got down from the dais and joined the demonstration and held up a big sign, "We will fight wage theft." And in fact, he was instrumental in passing that bill later on. He also worked to help DC residents who are working as construction workers fight the practice of classifying them as independent contractors in order to pay them very little. He understood the issue, and he fought for it. In fact, when there was a proposal to redevelop the waterfront in Poplar Point, Marion made sure that the plans not only called for workers from Ward 8 to being hired to build this development, but he convinced the Business Association of Ward 8 to include plans in the to include provisions in the plan that the workers would get the best wages and benefits possible for their work. And I'm just here to tell you that Marion will be sorely missed by every organization of working people in the district and by every working family. Thank you.